Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make some almond and apricot tarts. So this is going to have a pastry base. These little tartlets will have a pastry base with an almond filling using ground almonds and almond extract, and then some apricot placed on the top. They'll have some apricot jam in the base as well after I've blind baked them. So they're actually quite simple to make, but they take a bit of time because we chill the pastry and we have a couple of different steps to do. So I'll go straight onto the ingredients, and for the pastry I have 300 grams, which is 2 cups, based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of plain flour. I have 3 medium egg yolks, that would be large in the USA. I have 25 grams, 3 tablespoons of icing sugar, and I have 150 grams, which is 1 stick plus 2.5 tablespoons of cold unsalted butter, which I've chopped into pieces. I also have a pinch of salt to add into that pastry. And for the filling I have 200 grams, 2 cups of ground almonds, 100 grams, 2/3 of a cup, again based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of plain flour. I have 5 milliliters, 1 teaspoon of almond extract, 3 grams, half a teaspoon of salt. I have 4 medium eggs, which would be large in the USA. I have 250 grams, which is 2 sticks plus 1.5 tablespoons of unsalted butter, which is softened, and I have 250 grams, which is 1 1/4 cups of caster sugar. You could use granulated sugar. Then I'm going to use some apricot halves, which I'm again going to slice in half to put half of 1/2 on each top, at the top of each tartlet. And then I have some apricot jam, which I'm going to heat so that it's runny and I can brush it onto the base of our blind baked pastry cases. So the first thing to do is to make the pastry, because we have to chill that in the fridge. And I'm going to make my pastry in the mixer bowl of my immersion blender, and for that I'm going to put the flour in and my pinch of salt and the icing sugar, and then I'm simply going to mix those around just very briefly to get them a little bit combined. And that's good enough. So then I'm going to put my butter in, and I like to just toss that around a little bit so that it gets a bit coated in the flour before I start pulsing it. And I'm going to pulse that until it becomes a fine breadcrumb-like texture. So that looks quite good. If you see that there's a few small lumps in it, it doesn't matter really. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my egg yolks in, and I also should say I have a little drop of water, cold water, available if I need it to make the dough come together, but hopefully the egg yolks will be enough. And I'm going to process this until the egg yolks are combined into the flour and it begins to clump. and I can see that that's beginning to clump together now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip that out. So I'll tip it out onto some plastic wrap, and then I'm going to squeeze it between my hands so that it forms a disc. And so that feels quite moist, so I shouldn't need the water, but if you do need a teaspoon or so of water to make it come together, just add it in as you're processing it. I mean, you can do this all by hand, of course, in a large bowl. So that's actually looking like quite a nice dough. And I'm going to wrap that and form it into a rough disc like that, and I'm going to chill that in the fridge for 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes it will be ready to roll out. So I've chilled the dough for 30 minutes, and I'm simply going to divide it into about 8 equal pieces. And then I'm going to roll each piece out into a circle which is big enough to fill this little tartlet tin, and this has a diameter of 10 centimeters, which is just about 4 inches. Now, as you're lining the tart tin, if the pastry cracks, it doesn't matter, you just patch it up. It's very forgiving. So if I didn't mention, you can see I've floured my work surface. It has to be large enough to come up the sides as well, of course. I think that should be good enough. So I'll just place that in my tin, and as I mentioned, if it cracks, it doesn't matter at all. And then I'm going to set that onto a baking tray and do the same with the remainder. So there I have 6 rolled out, and I only have 6 of these tart cases, so I'm going to do my other 2 afterwards, but I'm simply going to prick the base of each tart case, And then I'm going to put them into the fridge and chill them for another 30 minutes. And as the 30 minutes comes to an end, I'm going to preheat my oven to 180 Celsius, that's 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit. And then these will be ready to line with some parchment paper, fill with some baking beans and bake off. Now I'll just say at this stage, if you don't have tart tins of this size, you can use bun tins. You can actually do them in a muffin tin. They would be have a smaller base, but they could be slightly taller if you wanted to, just not right up to the top of the muffin tin in all probability. And so it's very adaptable with the recipe. If you have those little fluted ones, they would be ideal as well. So I'll be back in 30 minutes when we'll put these into blind bake. So my oven is now preheated and it's been over 30 minutes. So I've taken the pastry cases out of the fridge, and here I simply have a paper case that you would use to line a muffin tin. You can use parchment paper, but these work quite well in this size. So what I'm going to do is simply line each of the bases with one of these paper cases. Like that, and then I'm going to fill them with baking beans. Now if you don't have baking beans, you could use some rice or some dried beans or some pasta, which you then wouldn't be able to use for cooking and eating later, but you could store those and reuse them for the same purpose. And I'm going to put those into the oven and I'm going to bake them for about 10 minutes. You can do 10 to 15 minutes, but I'm going to do it for about 10 minutes. I'll take them out of the oven, remove the baking beans and the parchment paper and put them back into the oven and bake them for a further 10 minutes so that they become baked or cooked all the way through. Then I take them out and allow them to cool down, and once they've cooled down I'll come back and we will make the filling and put the filling into the cases and bake them again. I blind baked the pastry cases and I trimmed them off as well after the first 10 minutes. When I took them out and I took the parchment paper out and the beans, I trimmed off the top of the pastry. So this is what they look like at the moment, and they're still cooling down a little bit. But what we'll do is we'll go on to make the filling. And for that I'm going to put my butter into a bowl with the sugar, and I'm going to cream those together. And that's creamed together quite nicely. So then I'm going to add in my eggs one at a time, and I'm going to mix each time until that single egg is fully incorporated. Then I'll add the next one and carry on until all four are in. And with the last egg, I'm going to add my salt in and my almond extract as well. And that's good like that. And then I'm going to add the flour in and just mix that until it's combined. And then the almonds as well. And that mixture is nicely combined now. And if you think it's a little bit too thick, you can add just a tablespoon of milk or something to loosen it up. But I think mine's probably fine as it is. So I'll just set that to the side for a moment. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take I have about 2 tablespoons of jam here, and I'm simply going to spoon a little bit into the bottom of each of the tart cases. And if there's a few chunks in, it doesn't matter, because this is an almond tart with almond and apricot tart. And that's good enough like that. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the cases with the almond mixture. And you could pipe this if you wanted to. But I'm simply going to fill it with an ice cream scoop and then spread it around to level it off. And then, with them filled like that, I'm going to take the half of apricot and cut it in 2 like that. Then I'm going to put 1 piece in the centre of each tart. And I'm going to put those into the oven, and I'm going to bake them for between 20 and 25 minutes until I can see that the filling has risen. It will rise up around the apricot, or it should do if it works properly, and colour nicely on the top. And when that's happened, I will take them out of the oven and I'll come back because I want to brush a little bit of apricot jam on them. So I baked the almond and apricot tarts for actually for 27 minutes until they'd coloured nicely on top. I think they were cooked through just a bit before that, but I baked them so that they colour just a little bit extra. And what I've done is I've warmed a couple of tablespoons of jam with a drop of water apricot jam this is, and I'm simply going to brush it over the top of the tarts. Just like that. And then I'm going to leave those to cool in that position, and when they're completely cool I take them out of the moulds, and I'll come back and show you the results and we'll have a taste. I've allowed the almond and apricot tarts to cool down, and I should say that I had more batter than I needed for making 8 of that particular size. I actually made a couple of square ones just to show that you can use different shapes, and I made one in a very small fluted tin, which I'll show you in a moment. But if you have excess batter, you can simply spoon that into paper cups in a muffin tin and bake that off as cupcakes or something. It's very, very tasty with that almond extract in the batter. So this is what my tarts look like now that they've cooled down, and this is the one that I did in a very small fluted tin that I have, and this one I did in, I have a brownie tin which has squares for baking brownies, and I simply did 2 in that in a tin like that as well. These are the ones which were in the silicone tart mould that I have, and I've cut one of them open so that you can see inside, so you can see the pastry, the layer of apricot jam, and then the cake basically on top of that. So I'll have a taste of this. The cake is lovely and soft and almondy, if there's such a word. It's like a frangipan, but frangipan doesn't really have flour in the way that this does. I think the flour helps to give it structure basically. The pastry is nice and crumbly and almost melts in the mouth, and then the sweetness of the jam and the slight tartness of the apricot that was on the top make this a wonderful little dessert, which can be served with some cream or some ice cream, or even some custard if you want to. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well. And I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.